Hey, friends. This is Martine Williams, and I am obsessed with all things mompreneur life and helping you to remix your priorities, your habits, your mindsets, and yes, even your relationships so that you can build a successful business without losing yourself in the process. I'm also obsessed with the color turquoise and lyrics of the 80s and 90s, but that's beside the point. Girlfriend, you don't have to hustle 24/7, 365 and continue to sacrifice your health, your relationships, and your sanity to be a successful mompreneur. As a small town girl living in a lonely world to a six-figure mompreneur, I am here to teach you how. There is a better way, and this podcast is your one-stop shop for all of the how-tos, the encouragement, the life hacks, the success tips, and of course, a little side of tough love. This is the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. So let's do this. Welcome back, friends, to the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. I am excited for our Turquoise Talk guest today, Julia Barbaro. She is a homeschooling mom of 6 children. She's a wife, a certified life and marriage coach, and author. She is an integral part of the behind-the-scenes operations of her husband, Gino's business ventures, including Jake and Gino and the Rand family of companies. Julia was inspired to become a certified life and marriage coach after witnessing the power of coaching. She felt compelled to give back and motivate others to set goals, seek out their soul purpose, and ask what's next in their life. Julia's passion is to empower couples to strengthen their mind, their communication, overcome obstacles, and seek clarity. Together, she helps them create a life plan for themselves, as well as encouraging parents to guide their children to adulthood. Julia is the author of The Cannolis Exploded and A Gelato Blast, children's books about decision-making and different paths we can take in life. Julia and her family live in St. Augustine, Florida, where they enjoy the old city and the simple beach life. This episode is so powerful for couples, and I really wanted to bring her on to talk about communication, about the support of the spouse as a mompreneur, and we talk about all those things and so much more. So I hope you're ready for this episode. It's an amazing episode, so let's do this. Well, welcome back, friends, to the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. I am super excited about today's Turquoise Talk guest as we dive into mompreneur life, marriage life, all the things related to relationships, communication. So I want to welcome Julia Barbaro to the podcast. Thank you so much for your time today. And I cannot wait to just kind of dive into some of this with you.
Thank you, Martine, for having me. I'm so honored to be on.
Awesome. So tell me, just for the listeners, a little bit about you, your family, kind of your background. Let us get to know you a little bit.
Sure. So I married at 23 to an amazing Italian husband who was in a restaurant business. I just fell in love with him. You know, it's one of those things. But yeah, no, we had an interesting start. We did meet at the restaurant, and I loved what he had, and that was a family. He had his family working with him. He had the closeness. He had, you know, the entrepreneur type, but also the support. And I just was drawn to it. I loved it. And, you know, some years later, we started dating and got married. But throughout the years, we had 6 children. We ended up homeschooling all of them from the beginning.
Wow.
So before it was the thing. So,
like bowing down, we are not worthy. Are you kidding me? Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Or it was like, you know, people would look at you funny and what do you mean? What about the socialization? All of that.
Right.
So it's been, you know, our oldest is 23 years old. So she's almost 2 years out of college now. And they did go to college. They got accepted to college and then. But all through the years, I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. That's what I really desired to be. I had some ideas that I wanted to do. I did want to go into teaching. I was a hairdresser for a while. I did have these passions that I loved, but the real one, I truly just wanted to be that mom and stayed home. And let me tell you, I did it, but it was difficult. It was challenging. It was lonely, painfully lonely, especially up in New York with those long winters. And I did question, like, what's my purpose here? Like, what am I doing? And it was up until, you know, my daughter went off to college, and I noticed she's beautiful. She's actually a missionary right now. But
awesome.
Was changing someone's life, like for the better, like bringing them back to God. And I was like, what the heck? And all of a sudden it clicked. Like that's
Right.
what I was doing all those years, but you don't see the fruit for so long. And so it's really hard as a mom because sometimes you're sitting like, why am I doing this? Why am I spending all this time with these children, which of course we love, but I'm going to just talk openly here.
Right.
There
Yeah.
are moments where you're like, is this all there is? And you love your children, and so I had to learn my lesson, but it took me years. And so into that, I was helping my husband with his restaurant. He asked if he just needed a break. He worked with his family. They're Italian, like I said. So mama's boy, but he needed a break and he was into real estate. And he comes home one day and he's like, Julia, what if we just sell the restaurant and move to Florida? Now we have 6 children. I mean, it was from senior year down to newborn. And I just was thinking like, I don't know. I mean, I didn't say anything yet, but I was just like, you're asking me to leave everyone and everything I know because you need a break. You need a change of life. You need all that. And all I could ask myself is, am I putting my husband first?
Right.
And it's a big question because I had to say, okay, hold on. I'm putting my family, like my sisters, my brother, my mom, my friends, all the stuff I know, I'm putting that ahead of my husband right now. And so I said yes. And I have to say, since that moment, our life has changed so much. Our relationship, it's amazing. Like I have a really long story, so it's hard to sum it up in a few minutes. But when you put each other first, things will change for the better. And it is amazing. And it's a challenge and it's scary at times. It's like, well, what about me?
Right. Yeah.
But they do it too.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now he is running a very successful multifamily real estate education program, Jake and Gino.
Nice.
And amazing community. He's such a sweet, loving guy. And people are attracted to that, that nurturing father type. And so he's built a huge community. And through that, people will ask me, well, how do you do it as the mom? How do you do it?
Right.
And so I had to think, it's like, okay, how do I do it? And so I wasn't a good communicator. I was a very good listener because I was painfully shy up until like 3 years ago. So I knew how to listen, but I was like, let me go and get a marriage certificate. So I learned that. And through that, it taught me how to talk to people, how to understand people, how to ask the right questions.
Right.
And it's helped me. And I always give advice to people, go take a life coaching program because it will help you in all sorts, every part of your life. I actually have my kids, once they graduate high school, they have to get certified because it's benefits.
You have to live it first.
Oh,
yeah,
100%.
you have to live it first yourself. So
yes,
you teach it. So
exactly.
Yeah.
So now what I'm doing is, we do a podcast about marriage and family and business. We just gave a talk to like his big group of entrepreneur real estate people. We talked about marriage and family, about 1,200 people. It was super fun. And that's what people are craving. They want to be successful in life, but they also want to know how to be happy at home. Yeah. And so that's what our mission is.
Yeah. I love it. And it is something that I think is not talked about a lot. There's so much of this individualism that's out there and, striving for individual success. And I love that. I mean, I can just tell by the way you're talking, like just, it's a family team, and the fact that you respected your husband and his needs it's not always easy to do that, but it is what we're called to do, Right. I mean, husbands are to, love their wives and wives are to respect their husbands. And by listening and even being open to the change, just showed him so much respect. So for those that are listening, if you're homeschooling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 kids, she is proof that, that you can do it and you can be successful and still have all this beautiful hair on your head because you can't see her, but she's got a beautiful head of hair. So, anyway, well, tell us a little bit about, we just talked about communication and, how do you effectively communicate with each other, with your different businesses and your different needs? Like, what have you learned either through your coaching or just having to do it because you have many people in your home and everybody probably has a different communication style. So for someone who's listening and that's really a pain point for them in their marriage, either specific to business or just in their marriage, like what's some key communication?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question because a lot of us are like, oh no, I got that down. I'm good at that. Or, I learned about that in the past. And I have to say with communication, it is an ongoing process. It is never ending. And once we figure it out, things change. And then we're like, wait a second, how come this is happening again? I thought we fixed this problem of communication because it's an everyday decision. It's an everyday decision to say, okay, what am I bothered about? Am I actually telling my husband what's wrong? Because I always tell people they have absolutely no idea what you're thinking. If there's anything to get out of this podcast, it's that even though they should, and it's always like, oh, but he should understand. He should know what I'm thinking. No, they don't. They are made so differently than us. It's amazing. And that is one thing that I, still once in a while struggle with, as, my husband and I will have a disagreement or something, and the kids are always around because we homeschool. And he's like, I don't understand what's wrong. And my 16-year-old Sophia, she'd be like, so Dad, earlier you said this, and this. I said, that's my point. It's a lot of us, we just assume the other person understands, or they know, or they should know. And it's all about asking. If I'm looking for support and I'm really having a hard time, because we all go through these ups and downs, like it's like kind of like today I got it all together. My husband's having a hard time. I have to notice that. I have to be like, all right, he is having a hard time. I'm okay right now. Let me give him a hand. Let me stop what I'm doing and that's about relationships. Like you said, it's really important that I remember that we are on the same team. And we are not in competition. And I think a lot of couples are in competition, whether to be parents, they want to be secretly, and I don't mean outwardly.
Right. Yeah.
If I see my husband doing something maybe that the kids love to do with him, but I want to be the fun one or whatever it is, you kind of swallow your pride a little bit. And you know what? That was impressive. I loved how you did that. You're an amazing husband. You're an amazing father. And it's that communication of me actually verbally telling him things that maybe I don't normally tell him, or I have bitterness or whatever it is. But just like we were talking about listening before, a lot of us like to talk. A lot of us like to talk. Our husbands maybe are trying to tell us something and we're finishing their sentence.
Right. Yeah.
Or we're putting in, oh, but don't you mean this? And we're thinking about what we want to tell them instead of listening. If we just stop for a minute and just listen, especially the kids, because they talk a lot. They talk all the time. We have there's 8 of us here in the home and everyone wants to tell me something at the same time. It's all about patience. And of course, I mess up all the time. And I want to be clear is that I'm trying to. But when we can just sit and say, you know what, Sophia, I really want to hear what you have to say, but Cecilia's in the middle of something, just to be that they're acknowledged. Because a lot of us, we just want to be acknowledged, but our husbands do too. Yeah. And a lot of times we really do put the kids' needs always ahead of theirs.
Yeah.
And once we switch it, all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, why am I happier? Like, why, you know what I mean?
Right. Well, and why are our kids happier? I mean, I think at first they may feel like, well, what about me? But the best thing we can do for our children is to have a strong marriage, to have a strong relationship, because not only are we teaching them about relationships, but, hopefully they're going to model that in their own relationships when they, get married and have a husband or a wife. And that was really when my husband and I actually went to a parenting class years ago before our first was born. That was one of the main things we took away, was having this designated like couch time. No matter what the kids were doing, when my husband came home, like I needed to stop and give him the attention and show the kids that he is my priority, and he would do the same for me. And when they were little, it was easier. We just put a toy in front of them, and for the most part, they would respect that. And it's just been kind of the model. Do you find that, what's your husband's name? I didn't hear you say. Juno. Do you find that y'all have like if someone's listening, like, okay, so what does that actually look like? Do you find like every day you set aside some time to kind of connect with each other and make that a priority? Or tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, we do. I mean, again, we mess up quite often. We have date nights on Friday now, and sometimes we forget. And the kids are like, hey, aren't you guys supposed to be going out? Because they like that's the mom guilt part. We think, oh, they always want us around. They actually don't.
Right.
Don't. But we do. But like I said, it has to be, it's yes, you make it a habit to listen. You do. But at times you get distracted. And a lot of times the distraction will just be one little distraction and another one. And so you do have to, even if you have to put it in I know this sounds kind of cheesy, but put it in your calendar.
Oh, yeah.
I spend time with my husband at 5:00. And then, okay, so if I'm not a good listener, the question is, what is a good listener to me? What am I supposed to be doing? Because a lot of times, Martine, we're like, well, we want to be better. I want to be a better wife. I want to be a better listener. And we ended at that. And we get in the situation where we have no idea what that means. What does better mean?
I love that. Yeah.
And so I say, okay, when I talk to people, I'm like, how do you want to be? How do you want to be a listener? Tell me what a good listener is to you. And then for me, it's someone to just sit and pay attention and look at the mannerisms of your husband, because you can, especially women, we have intuition. Like, we all know what we can see. Okay. I know if my husband comes home, and we all do,
Right.
they come through the door. We know if they've had a good day or not.
Mm-hmm.
We know a lot, and we could do a lot about it. And so take advantage of that for a good. So if I say, okay, I want to be a better listener, that means I'm going to sit and hear what he has to say. I'm not going to finish his sentence. I'm not going to interrupt. I'm not going to roll my eyes. I'm not going to make a gesture, because all of these things tell him that I'm not interested, that I just want him to hurry along, that I have other things to do. And so it goes back and forth. And it's that responsibility that we have as a person, as a wife, as a woman, to respect them. Okay, I'm going to listen to everything you have to. I'm not going to overreact. If it's something I don't like, I'm going to decide, okay, here's how I want to react, because our reaction is part of that communication. Right. And then it's when we talk to them, how do I want the words to come out? Do I want him to be afraid to tell me next time? Because if that's the case, I'm going to overreact and say some mean things, and you know what I mean? Right. So because the more we do that, the positive, the more they're going to come to us and talk to us and trust us. And the more we yell and overreact and roll our eyes, I can't believe you do that, I can't believe you're late all the time, the less they're going to come talk to us. And so when they're not talking to us, they're going to go somewhere else, whether that's a friend or whatever, it doesn't matter. But don't we want to connect? Yeah. And I think the communication is so, so important.
It is, and consistent. And like you said, this is not about perfection. There's no one gets it right 100% of the time. It's just carving out that time. And I remember doing that, with my kids too, because I was, in the beginning when I was growing my business and they were little and I'm working and I'm, feeling the mom guilt. And I want to touch on that in just a minute. But I remember my coach saying, just schedule in the time in your calendar, for your husband. And I'm like, that seems so unsexy, but if it gets done, it gets done. Exactly. What's on your calendar gets done.
I even put an alarm on.
For it to be boring, or is it better that it happens? So I'm like, okay. And I said, well, I just feel like a bad mom that I have to actually schedule in time on my calendar for my kids. That just seems so unnatural. Like we should just naturally want to do these things and have the time to do it. But it really just does go back to the simplicity of scheduling. What's important goes on your calendar and it gets done. So I love that you brought that up. So I know with 6 kids, you've experienced mom guilt, and that's something that a lot of my listeners, struggle with off and on. And so I would love to hear kind of how that shows up for you and what you've done to kind of either prevent it, or when it happens, you're like, nope, I'm going to say this instead.
This one was really, I'm going to tell you, my biggest challenge. Aside from public speaking, this one is this is my second. Public speaking was
you're doing great.
My major fear in the world. And I decided one day I didn't want to be afraid. And I just started a podcast with my husband. So we can all overcome.
Just dove right in. Yeah.
Yes. The mom guilt was it. I've been thinking about it for some years. And I actually just recently had to say, okay, where is this guilt coming from? Because there was someone that was, and I'm sure people listening maybe know what I'm talking about, but there was a show that they made about how it used to be with, before electricity, before ovens, with dishwashers and all that stuff. And the husbands would go out and find the food, and the women's would be home. The women would be home taking care of the house, but they would be making sure the fire was going the whole time. They were literally cooking all day long. They were washing the clothes and hanging them up. I mean, all the things that we are doing right now without all the magical electricity. Okay. And I remember thinking like, wow, when did you have time to sit and listen to your children? Like, when did you have time to do all the things that we think that we have to do as moms right now in the world? And how did it change like this? Because I was thinking, where did my mom guilt come from? And I know my mother doesn't listen to this podcast because she doesn't listen to podcasts. So I'm just going to go there for 1 second. But she was a single mom. She raised me and my 2 siblings. She did a great job, but she always worked. And so she has a guilt about it. And I know she does. It's hard for her to talk about. But now that where I am in life, she opens up a little bit. And so anytime I would do something outside the home, she would get irritated at me. And so then I would rush back home and stay at home. And it took me years and years to figure out that was her guilt sitting on top of my shoulders all the time, weighing on my heart, because I didn't want to say, hey, it's okay to work. It's okay to do things outside the home. It's okay. The kids will be okay.
Right.
And I had to think back because, like I said, I homeschooled, I stay at home. So all my kids were home with me all the time. And there were days and Martine, I'm not kidding. Like I would homeschool them. I would feed them. I would, fold their laundry with them. We'd clean up their room all together. And there was one day the kids are like, Mom, you never really spent time with me. And I just sat there like, wait, what?
What did you just say?
If I get a shower in by myself, that was, that was like a miracle morning. And I thought, my gosh, I think I'm looking at this all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's the amount of time we put in. It's the quality time we put in.
Yeah.
I could sit with one of the kids and have a coffee date with them, and it could be, 20 minutes. And they are just, they're in like cloud nine. They're like, I had the best time with Mom. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's our issue as mothers, is we think we have to spend every waking moment with them. Otherwise, they're missing out on us, because they want our success too.
Right.
My teenage girls, they are like my biggest fans. If that, it's silly to say, but they really, when I do a podcast or if I like speak with my husband, they are there cheering me on. They're like, Mom, we're so proud of you.
Yeah.
Like, what, they want me to do it. The kids want you to be successful.
Right.
But it's us, we hold back. So every time that feeling of, I really shouldn't go away with my husband, like, business this weekend, the kids will be okay. Mm-hmm. They're going to be okay. They know I love them.
Yeah. I love that. It is just an ongoing process, of reminding yourself of the truths, because our mind plays so many games on us. And
yes.
When I was dealing with it, I was asking a friend and she was like, do you have any evidence? Like, are you keeping like evidence of the time you are spending with your kids? Are you, whether it's an album on your social of the photos that you've done or in your calendar, seeing you did play a board game with them or whatever, because I could tell myself all of these positive things, but at the end of the day, like having that evidence that I actually was doing those things, really helped. And then just having a conversation with them, like you said, they really don't need to be with us as much as we think they need to be with us. So, sitting down and actually going, okay, what is really important to you? Because I was raised with a mom who worked from 9 to 5 and she had dinner on the table at 6 o'clock every single night, and I remember seeing her with her suit on, still cooking, over the stove. And it wasn't like a casserole. It was, a 3-course meal. And that was the expectation I was putting on myself. And it wasn't until I talked to my kids and they're like, we don't really care.
Yes. I love that. What you just said was so like, that's what you just said. You just said, I talked to my kids. We just hold everything. We're like, no, this is how it is. I know this. My kids are feeling this way. Just like we were talking about with our husbands can't know what you're thinking. Right. We don't know what our children are thinking.
Right.
We don't. Right. And we could talk to them. We can ask them. I mean, I asked my older, a 23 and a 20-year-old, a 17-year-old. I'm like, tell me what I could have done better. Mm-hmm. And they sat and they listened and they thought, like, honestly, Mom, it was great.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right. So because all the memories that you have were all, and I'm kind of exaggerating, but how many times you failed them.
Right. Yeah.
All the things you did wrong.
Yeah.
All the memories that, oh my gosh, they were so upset. I really messed them. Even taking them away to Florida. I'm like, this is going to be like a lifelong issue that they're going to have. Mm-hmm. But they're happy. They're good. They're fine.
Right.
They're going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So one of the questions that I get asked all the time is, how do I get my husband to support my business, how to be on board with it? So whether it's an online boutique or, they have a direct selling business or a brick and mortar and he just doesn't understand. Side note, my dad owned 2 restaurants. So just like, can I just pat you on the back for being in the restaurant business? Because it's tough. I mean, it's crazy. It's so crazy. And I mean, he's been out of it. He actually went into real estate too, after he sold the restaurant. But anybody that mentions the restaurant business, I'm like, it's an amazing industry, but it's so hard. Oh my goodness. Yes. But what would you say to someone who's listening is like, my husband just will not get on board. Like, how can she communicate her excitement with business? It's
interesting, Martine, because with my husband having his real estate business, and a lot of people leave their W-2 jobs to pursue real estate. The question I always get is, how do I get my wife on board? I've talked to like hundreds of men. How do I get my wife to be on board? So this is the first time I've actually gotten the opposite question. So I really do appreciate it. That's exciting for me. But the answer is the same always. Yeah. First of all, we have to ask. And a lot of times, most people don't actually say, hey, listen, my husband's named Gino. Hey, Gino, I want to pursue this. I actually want your support. I need it, of course, but to be wanted is something different.
Right. Yeah.
And I want your support. I won't be able to fully put myself into it with excitement and everything unless you, my partner, is 100% with me, because I want to be excited with you. I want you to be part of it, whatever that means. Because even when my husband was pursuing his real estate, there were times where I couldn't help him physically, but I supported him.
Right.
He said, he would tell me just that support, knowing I come home, going from the restaurant to the real estate, because he would work like double. I don't even know how he did it. And I wouldn't give him a hard time about, why aren't you watching the kids? I need you to watch the kids. I need to, you know what I mean? And so it's that support that you're asking for. So this actually is really important to me. And I don't want to do it without you.
Right.
Because a lot of times we don't realize this, but we want to do things together. We want to be partners, whether they're doing anything with you or not, just the fact that they know that they're partners with you, because you are partners in life.
Right.
You can work at different corporations, whatever it is. But to experience it together and be excited about it together, I always encourage people to make sure that you let your wife or your husband know that you want them to be part of it with you. Because sometimes it's just so simple as that.
Yes. And I can definitely vouch for that. I mean, my husband's always been very supportive, really, of all my businesses. But I remember at one point, I kind of had a conviction, honestly, that you never really asked him. I've asked him to support, but I've never really asked him, like, would you be willing to be my business partner? Because he has gifts that could totally benefit the business that I didn't have. And just having that conversation, I mean, the next day he had catalogs and stuff he was just handing out at his business. And it's just that invitation.
Sure. Do you find or do you talk to people that it's almost like they want to do it on their own to prove themselves? Because I think sometimes that is an issue as well. It's like, my husband has his garage job. Now I want to prove myself. And I really think when that happens, I feel like we're holding ourselves back a little bit, because we forget, just like you said, is our spouse has gifts that we do not have.
Yeah.
And they can benefit us. If it's truly, we want to be successful, take advantage. Your husband has things that it's a uniqueness that none of us have.
Right. Right. And I think the other part is, if you're not making your husband a priority with date nights, 100%. And he feels like your business is a competition with that time with him, then why would he want to be supportive? You wouldn't want to support him in his business if it was, taking over time with you. So I think it goes back to, are you keeping him, your number one priority outside of yourself, and then, not allowing your business to kind of take over those times that you were being, with him. So I think that's huge.
Oh, I think that's bigger than we think, because like I was saying before, like the man has the role, we have the role. And sometimes if we're trying to, and again, it's not that you were pushing him down, but we want to be successful. And then therefore we don't pay attention to him. That is, I think, what I've seen from experience of other people, that is the worst thing that you can do in a relationship, because the men need to know that they are the men. They do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much. It really doesn't. Like, we're the complicated ones. They're so simple.
They are so simple.
You know what I mean? And sometimes it's like, what are we thinking? Simplify this, So it's just that. And it's like, I love what you said. Just make sure you're putting them first. Absolutely.
Right. So switch gears just a little bit into kind of finding that closeness, that either you're craving, with your spouse. We mentioned date nights a couple of times, but if someone is craving that and they're just not feeling like they're, the husband is interested or reciprocating that same craving, like what would you say, or how do you coach people through this?
It goes back to that question of ask them. A lot of, I've met married, and myself included, that I'm afraid to know what they'll say. So I'm going to avoid the question. And so in a situation like this, like if there's something wrong, you seem to be, quiet. You're not really excited to see me when I come home, or whatever it is. If we mention that to them, I'm telling you, the conversation will take off, because like I said earlier, we want to be noticed. So do they. And a lot of times it stems from something that they're feeling that maybe we're, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the communication, that's why when I talk about communication with people, sometimes when you work on that, all the other things kind of fall into place, because they don't feel like, I'm busy, and, the kids are busy. We're all working, running around and everything. And he comes home and everyone kind of ignores him, let's say, because we've been running around all day and,
Yeah.
and a lot of times I'm like, hey, kids, look, dad's home. And they're like, Dad, they just need to be reminded. We have to be a little bit more verbal in a sense where it's positive and it's going to be supportive, not, oh, really, Dad, you came home this late type of thing. Do you know what I mean? Right. Our words are so powerful as the mother.
Yeah.
The way we show up in the room will change everything else about. I mean, when I walk downstairs in the morning, if I'm in a bad mood or whatever, everyone else is kind of like, oh, hi, Mom. But if I come down with a smile on my face, everyone lights up.
Yeah.
And so I tell women, like, you have a power.
Right. Yeah.
You got to be careful. You got to be careful because you can make or break the day sometimes.
Yeah.
But with the husbands, we have to start noticing. It's really important, that awareness that we have. We can see if something's not right. And we get to decide at that point, am I going to do something about it, or I'm going to just put it off? Right. And what happens is sometimes we put it off for years. And then we separate a little bit and we're like, I don't know what happened. We kind of went our own ways. It's just over time of the littlest of things that we've forgotten. You walk by your husband, give him a pat on the back, give him a rub. You know what I mean? Just something so basic to say, I see you.
Right. Yeah.
I can see you here, or, just, a hug or something. I mean, he works from home sometimes too. So I sneak up in the office. And again, I forget this half the time too, but sometimes I sneak up in the office and I'll just sit there and we have an espresso or something together. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Unexpected. Just, we have to remember to just make them priorities, but also to remember them and to make sure that they know that we're here and we see them, even if a lot of times, as moms too, we get a little controlling and, they'll play with the kids or something. And we're like, oh no, that's not how they like to play. They like to play it like this, right. And so we try to control them. We try to mother them. They don't want to be mothered. They just want to, and so what I've changed it to is like, I noticed you playing with the kids. That was pretty neat. Yeah. I loved how you did it. You did it so different than I did.
Yeah.
I really love to see that. And so now they're being acknowledged.
Yeah.
Yeah. All these little things, but it takes time. It's just one step, just one little thing a day to add on.
Yeah.
And again, sometimes you have to put them in your reminders. There's nothing wrong with that.
I was going to say, just like a simple text message. Yes. I think we overcomplicate.
Yes.
A lot of things.
Like it doesn't always have to be major conversation.
Right.
Yes.
Right. It's just, again, everybody wants to be seen.
Sure.
And respected for who they are and how they show up, in the family. And so I think that's really, really good. So you mentioned you didn't say take charge, I know what you said, but it reminded me of one of my core values and our family's core values is taking personal responsibility.
Yes.
So we can't sit back and wait on our spouse to change or for him to finally, get on board with the business. Like we need to be treating them right and being proactive and intentional about creating the relationship that we want and not waiting and taking personal responsibility for how can I show up? It just needs to start with me.
Yeah,
we can't wait on them to change, right? And we can't change them. They have to have their own convictions to change. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that's something you value too.
Yeah, that is such a basic thing that we go into marriage thinking, oh, I'm going to change this person, or I don't like this about him, or you know what I mean? And I have to tell you that that's just our excuse not to work on ourselves. It really is. And it's so easy to say. It's so easy to point out all the problems with everyone else around us. And that's not just our husbands, everyone. It's like, oh, if you change this, our relationship would be better. If you treated me this way, it'd be better. If you bought me, and I love the 5 Love Languages, the book, the 5 Love. I do love it, but I think at times you can abuse it because if you don't do it right, then it's your fault.
Right.
And so it's really important you figure out how you know that you are respected. You know what I mean? If my husband says something, because they're people. People insult. People make mistakes all the time. And maybe I'm insulted or, it was this big joke that we had one of our first podcasts. He was trying to make a joke and he used the words, my wife used to be very lazy. And I sat there and I took the whole thing. I was very good about the whole podcast. And at the very end, I went off. I was like, I can't believe that you said that. And I'm not kidding. For the one word that he used, lazy, I almost stopped. I was like, forget it. We're not doing the podcast. I'm not speaking with you anymore. I'm not the kids' books, all of that. And I think back to that. It took me 2 days to recover from that because it was such a small thing, but I really took it personally. Yeah. He's like, I really was joking. Like it just came out. It came out wrong. And I was like, oh my
I bet
gosh.
he's taking that word out of his language.
Yes, it's so funny. We talk about it still, but I had to say to myself, wait a second, does he think I'm lazy? No.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So but it still hurts for some reason,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so when our spouse says something to hurt us, we have to ask, is that true? And we have to know what we really are. Are we, whatever it is that they call us or whatever they do, because it's about us deciding, well, you know what? Because why can a stranger come up to you on the street and say something mean to you and you're like, yeah, whatever, and just keep walking. Right. Yeah. But if your husband says that same thing, you're just, I mean, why is that? Because maybe they think that about you, but the whole point is knowing your worth, knowing your value, knowing your strengths already. And I always think like this, if someone says something, especially our husband or whatever it is, we don't like it. I always say to myself, I wonder what they're going through. They must be going through something difficult for them to say something not so nice or whatever it is, because we really have to be working on ourselves. And I think, our mindset, know our values, know our decisions, that responsibility is such a piece. We actually wrote 2 kids' books all about responsibility, because we have to be responsible for the thoughts that we let fester in our head.
Right. Yeah.
We have to be responsible for the words we use, for how we react. So now when my husband says something, and I know he's so innocent and sweet, so I know, but I take it the wrong way. I have to sit there for a second and say, okay, no, yeah, I'm not going to let this bother me.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I'll question. I'm like, did you mean this? He's like, oh no, I didn't mean that. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I need to move on.
Right. Yeah.
That's up to us. We have that power to move on if we want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's pretty big. We have a huge responsibility for ourselves, and then let them be responsible for themselves.
Right.
Let go of that control as a woman, as a mother figure, to be, we do feel responsible for everyone else, especially the kids, and you know what I mean?
Right. Right. I think just being able to choose your mindset, how you're going to respond. And I mean, it takes practice.
Sure.
I mean, if you've not been able to kind of take a piece of criticism or a harsh word that's spoken and really kind of fact check it, and is this really true? Or is this, and to be able to be sensitive to, okay, maybe they're just having a bad day. And this could be anybody. I'm not even just talking about your spouse, but I think that it does take intentionality, that you want to think that way and that you want to respond in that way, because if not, we just react to everything that comes our way. And I think it just takes practice. So if you're listening, you're like, well, that sounds nice. She must just have, all these special skills that I don't have. No, it just takes practice, and it takes being intentional, and you're not going to get it right 100% of the time. I don't get it right 100% of the time. I know you don't either, but it's just knowing, okay, this is how I'm going to choose to show up today. And if someone says something harsh, I'm going to try to be more thoughtful of, okay, what's going on in their world that's making them this angry or this upset. And it doesn't come natural to most people to have kind of that intuition and to be thinking in that way. So maybe that's just a new mindset you want to adopt, and a new skill set.
One of the things I do love is the journaling, or even writing, whatever word you want to use, because a lot of people don't like the journaling, but because a lot of times we have all these thoughts in our head and they're just taking up room and they're causing us stress. And once we can just write them down, take them out of our head, put them on paper, all of a sudden it's like, oh, now I have a clearer mind, and I can read them, and I can say, wow, this really isn't that big of a deal. I can move this. I can move on this one, cross it out. This one, you maybe write another one down and you're like, all right, this one I need to address. How am I going to address it? I love coming up with plans. I mean, even the basic of issues that we're having. I have an issue here. What am I going to do about it? What are my options? Because a lot of us, we don't think about, we have options. We can make a decision based off of, okay, I can do nothing, or I can do something, or I choose to do something. Okay, what are those some things I could do?
Right.
I could talk to them, or, I could let them know what I'm thinking. But then write them all down, because like I said, a lot of times when they're in our head, they make sense.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Everything, it's okay. But when we write them, now they become real in front of us. And then we can decide what to do and we come up with a plan. We could say, okay, here's what I would like to say. And now maybe I would like to say it a little bit more respectfully. And here's how I'm going to react. I mean, everything. If you want to be a better listener, write down what a good listener is.
I love that.
What does that mean? And then follow it. Here's how I am right now, and here's what I need to change. And then come up with a plan to actually execute it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I'm talking to my clients, my coaching clients about hard conversations or just any conversation they're wanting to have, especially with their spouse, and like timing and tone is everything.
Oh.
And I prepare for those conversations like I would for any other meeting. Like you said, writing down, okay, here's what I really want to make sure that I say, because it's really easy in the heat of the moment for all those emotions to come up. And then it ends up being a complete, just awful experience. And then who wants to repeat that? Right. So then it like shuts down any maybe future communication.
Yes, exactly.
Or he sees you coming and he's like, oh, here we go again, So really just understand, okay, what's the tone of voice that I'm going to use? And when is the best time for me to have this conversation? It's probably not on a date night, because date nights are supposed to be fun.
Yes.
They're not. If every date night turns into a family meeting or a couple,
100%.
then their date nights are going to go away too. Yes. So again, little things that make a big difference.
Right.
And really, like, I want to make sure this is what I want to make sure I'm feeling. I'm working through it first. Like you said, this is what I make sure that he understands. And this is the point, of the meeting. This is the outcome I would like to see happen, or the outcomes I'm open to. And it's just, we just don't take the time to do that. We react.
We don't. And it's interesting
in the moment.
Because if we took the time, that's when our relationship is unbelievable. We put so much work into kids, into maybe if we're working but we forget that we have to put work into our marriage. We do, because it's like, oh, wow, if that's not going well, then really nothing else is. We're just trying to wing it, and we're trying to, push through. But to have a plan for me is the easiest way to do it, because now it's, like you're going into a meeting, exactly like you said. You wouldn't go into a meeting screaming and crying, you know what I mean? Right. Because if you had a boss, they'd be like, all right, we don't need you anymore. We don't need you for this one. But our husbands, I think it's a lack of respect and a lack of, we don't feel like they understand us, because they don't. They don't understand what
why we need to communicate.
Yes, they don't understand, but we have to explain it in a sense where they do understand. And so even when we're talking to them, telling them the issue, it's like, oh, okay, I told my husband, I got it off her back. We go our separate ways. How sure are we that they truly understood? So I always suggest that you say, okay, do you understand where I'm coming from? Can you just, give me a summary of what I just want to make sure we're connected here.
Right.
And a lot of times I've done this. A lot of times my husband's like, oh, wait, that's what you meant? Oh, that's not what I thought.
That's not what I heard. Right. That's not what I heard. People hear things through
very differently.
Filters. Yeah.
100%. And that has saved a lot of arguments by just confirming what the other person meant. So if he tells me something, I'm like, so what you mean is this?
Right.
No, this, and okay. Good thing that we cleared that up.
Yeah.
Because we know we're putting all that work into communicating. We have to clarify that it's correct.
Two more questions that I wanted to ask you. The first one is, so both of you have your own businesses. You've written 2 books. You've homeschooled 6 children. You moved from New York to Florida. So I'm pretty sure you have experienced burnout once or twice in your lifetime. And that's something I really love to talk to people about and find out, how did it show up for you? Like what were you feeling physically, mentally, emotionally? And then how did you kind of work your way out of burnout? It's an epidemic. I truly believe that. And it's become this is just the way life is. And I'm on a mission to reverse that mentality. So can you kind of share with us I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, no. It's funny because I have in 2 different parts of my life. I feel like this part of my life is so different than the earlier stage. The earlier one obviously is with kids, with the whole, and it's that feeling of I want to do everything by myself. I want to be look, that mom has it all together. Yeah. And I have to do literally have to do everything. And I didn't want to ask for help. And so when I early on, when I was in that situation, I think I was pregnant with our 5th, and I just had a meltdown. I'm like, I can't do this. Like it was just, and I realized, I'm like, my gosh, I am pretending that I have it all together.
Right.
I'm not asking, my mom was always asking, can I help you? What can I do? My mother-in-law, everybody, every cleaning person we had, I would fire because they weren't good enough. You know what I mean?
They didn't clean the way you do, right?
Yes, exactly. They didn't do it the way I did it. So therefore they couldn't work with me, And I had to sit and I wasn't very, my husband and I, we had such respect for each other. We had such trust. All of that, but our communication stunk. It was really bad. Yeah. And so he didn't even know. He had no idea.
You were drowning.
And so I'm just 100%. And I'm like, how am I going to get through this? Like what? And I was just like praying. I'm like, what do I do? And I had to like literally surrender and say, I can't do this by myself. We're not supposed to do this by ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really the moment that I can remember where I had to realize that it was okay to ask for help. It's okay. It doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean that you're in a situation where, you're over your head and, you took on too many children, whatever it is.
Right.
But that moment was like, it's okay. It doesn't mean that I'm not successful.
Right. Yeah.
It was hard because it's kind of a pride thing where you want to have it all together.
Yeah.
And then later on now, when I'm in where I am right now, it was a similar. So you think that we learned from our past, right? It was a similar thing.
We don't fall as hard the second time, maybe.
Where again, I wanted to do it all. I wanted to, take charge. But what happens is once you give a little bit of stuff away, a little bit of here, I just need help with this. And it happened with my husband because I did a lot of work for him. I would do a lot of behind the scenes. I would record him. A lot of his education was recorded by me and some of my children and edited and put out, you know what I mean? And slowly as we would be giving it away to other people to do it, we'd pay other people. All of a sudden I was feeling like, am I needed? Am I going to be needed anymore?
Right.
And so it was a moment where I realized that that's why I hold on to things, is because what if that person doesn't want me anymore? You know what I mean? Whether it's children, whether it's your husband, whether it's, you're working with people. And it's really one of those things of knowing your own worth. And even if I had nothing to offer them and I couldn't help them, I'm still worth it. You know what I mean? I'm still, and that's a hard thing to come to terms with.
Right.
But I learned twice really, really hard.
Yeah.
that was something that was important. And it's okay to let go. It's okay to let go of that control that we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Someone might be able to do it better than we can. And shouldn't we praise them? Shouldn't we be like, I want you on my team?
Yeah.
Instead of, I don't want you anymore because I want to be the best. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
In mothering and also in business.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I love that. I feel like someone just got set free from what you just said. I mean, it's such a powerful thing to understand and be self-aware that you were afraid you weren't going to feel needed anymore or wanted anymore. And I think there's probably a lot of women who, like I said, just got freed up from that because they've been trying to figure out like, where's this coming from?
Like why? Because we don't know what that feeling is.
Yeah. Like I see other people delegating what's wrong with me. And I feel like there's a lot of people that's going to speak to. So thank you for being vulnerable enough to kind of share that. So as we wrap up, a couple of things. One is tell me what you have, like where can people connect with you? Where's the best place for them to connect? You can tell us about your 2 books, that you've written or you and your husband have written.
Yeah. So if you go, my husband's company is called Jake and Gino, which is jakeandgino.com. Okay. And he has an educational platform. And through there, you can also go on juliaandgino.com, which will go directly to our children's books, which are, it's 3 characters and they, basically it's all Italian. So it's a bakery and a cannoli bakery and it explodes. And the 3 characters have to figure out what to do. And so you have Responsible Rhino, Pity Party Pig, and Creative Caterpillar doing different things. And it's just that thing of teaching children, like, look, there are options. You don't have to feel sorry for yourself for too long and not move on. You can be responsible. And, you'll see the story. And then the second book, it carries them in, but we talk about who our mentors are, who in our life are we listening to? Because that's a big thing, I really wrote it for the parents, to be honest. It's for the kids, but the parents, who are we listening to and who are we surrounding ourselves with? Yeah. Because who our circle is, it really does make a difference in our life. And who like we're allowing in our home as friends with their children or we're letting our children hang out with, that actually is shaping your children more than we think. Yeah. And that's a really important, we have a responsibility to make sure that they're hanging out with good people. Right. Because our kids are so vulnerable. They could, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so that book carries that in. It's just a conversation started with our children about all these topics. But so if you go on juliagino.com, it'll take you to that. We also have a personal finance academy, which teaches the basic, what is a bank, what money is, how to, finance, basic finance information. Even some mindset stuff that a lot of our young people, and including me as an adult, never learned because they don't teach this in school. Right. Basic communication, listening skills, all of the stuff that we talk about. Through there, you can see our podcast, which is the Julie and Gino Show, which we talk about family and business.
I love it. Well, we'll put all the links to everything that she mentioned in the show notes, so you'll have an opportunity to kind of connect with her And I mean, we could spend a whole other podcast episode just talking about mentoring and having mentors and all of that, because that's a big core value
100%.
that we have as a family as well. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I hear people say, and we'll kind of close with this, a lot of mompreneurs will say, well, one day I'm going to get back to fill in the blank. I'm going to get back to taking care of myself. I'm going to get back to dating my spouse. I'm going to finally pursue that business. And I try to flip the script and say, let's make today your day one.
Yeah.
Because we're not guaranteed another day. We've seen that in the way our world has been the last 2 or 3 years, is we're just not guaranteed that next day. So if you had the opportunity to talk to like all the mompreneurs of the world, like what would be one thing you would say to them about that one day I'm going to get back to?
That's very common. I hear that quite often. That was one thing that I never wanted to say. And I never actually did. I didn't know I would end up where I am right now, especially when I was a young mom. But I never said I was too busy. I never wanted to use that term. I didn't like it. There was something about it, or, because I always knew people that did that. One day when the kids are older. Yeah, there's something wrong with that. Why can't we do it right now? What's wrong with it? And I realized over time that was their excuse. That was their wording to give themselves permission that you don't have to do it. I don't have to do it because I don't have time. I don't have to do it because one day I'll do it.
Right.
So we give ourselves an out. We give ourselves, it's okay to say no right now because maybe you don't want to. I feel like when people say that, they don't want to, or they don't know how. So if you don't want to, especially with our spouse, for what reason do you not want to go out with them? For what reason would you not want to connect with them? What are you afraid of? There's something in you that's afraid to maybe be real with them, because like we were talking about it earlier, sometimes we're afraid that if they see the real us, they won't want us anymore.
Yeah.
They see that we're having a hard time with the kids, or having a hard time juggling kids and business. Maybe they'll see us as weak and they'll think less of us. But I promise you, they will see the real you and love you more. Yeah. We're not supposed to be this perfect person. Right. We just want to be real with our spouse and let them love you for who you are.
Yeah.
They already know you. They already know everything about you. Just allow them to love you. And the wording of, like you said, one day, take Martine's advice. Let today be that one day. And if you don't know how, because that's the other reason a lot of times, find someone that does know how. If you want to start a business, you have to start a website, whatever it is, and you're overwhelmed and we're just kind of put it off. Who knows how?
Yeah.
Find a mentor that say, you know what, I love how you did this. I love how you did your website. Or even if I love how you are a mother, I love how calm you are. And I'm always afraid, hey, I notice how calm you are and patient you are. Can you give me advice? Because I want to be like that. I love that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it could be just the basic thing to, entrepreneur, but also a motherling. You can be like, you see a mother and you're like, I want what she has. Go ask her.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Either don't want to do it or you don't know how. I love that. So really think about that as you're looking at your goals for this year and your relationships and your, entrepreneur adventures. Why do you keep saying one day? Because again, we're not guaranteed another breath. So we want to make sure we're showing up and taking that action today. So thank you so much for being on the show. We literally probably could talk for another hour. It's really fun. Very easy to talk to. So I appreciate you coming on. And I know there were a lot of eye-opening moments for the listeners today. So again, we'll put all the show notes, all the links to everything and how you connect with her in their podcast. I'm sure you might want to go over there and check out their podcast as well. But thank you again for being on the show. And to all of the listeners, we will catch you on the next episode. Thank you so much, Julia.
Thank you, Martine. Thanks, everybody.
Well, that's a wrap, friends, for this week's episode of the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. Thank you so much for listening and for following the show. It means so much to me. And listen, friend, sharing is caring. So if you loved this episode and thought of some fellow mompreneurs who could benefit, send them the link. Share this episode or take a screenshot and head on over to Instagram and share and tag me at Martine31Williams. We are connected on Instagram, right? It's where you will get all the fun behind the scenes of my life and business as a mompreneur. Until next time, know that I am believing in you always.